It had been 2 weeks since the night Mark Hale was executed. The crime had captivated the city. The brutal murder of a young woman, the evidence pointing squarely at the man who was accused. A perfect trial, a perfect conviction, or so everyone thought. Clara Wallace, a crime journalist who had once reported on Hale's trial, was now tasked with investigating the case posthumously. She was no stranger to high-profile cases, but something about this one gnawed at her. Something didn't sit right. She'd been present at the trial, watched Hale's cold, unwavering stare as he was sentenced. She remembered the strange calmness in his demeanor, the way he refused to acknowledge guilt, but never denied his actions. The entire world believed he was the killer, but when she received the letter, she couldn't ignore it. The note was from Hale, scribbled hastily in his final hours, slipped into a pile of documents meant to be destroyed. It wasn't just a confession, it was a challenge, a puzzle that screamed for attention. They did it. The last words of a condemned man who had nothing to lose. Clara's instincts kicked in. She began revisiting the case files, poring over the trial transcripts. Hale's defense attorney, a slick man who'd vanished shortly after Hale's execution, had given him a rock-solid defense. But now Clara began to wonder if it was too perfect. Every lead she followed seemed to end in a dead end. The more she dug, the more the facts didn't add up. Why hadn't the defense pushed harder for an investigation into the missing security footage from the night of the murder? Why was the timeline of the victim's death so conveniently muddled? And why, just days before Hale's execution, had the victim's family lawyer disappeared without a trace? But the more Clara uncovered, the more someone seemed determined to shut her down. A car followed her as she left the courthouse. Mysterious phone calls threatened her with vague warnings. Drop the case, or you'll regret it. One night, as Clara was leaving her apartment, she noticed a figure in the shadows. A man who had been watching her for weeks. The chill in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. Someone didn't want her digging any deeper. Clara's obsession grew. She began to receive strange packages. Photos, handwritten notes, even files, all pointing to a powerful figure within the city's elite. Someone whose fingerprints were all over the trial, the murder, and Hale's execution. The deeper she went, the more she began to feel the weight of paranoia pressing against her chest. She couldn't trust anyone. Every face seemed familiar. Every conversation felt like it was being monitored. Then came the breakthrough. The last witness, a janitor who had been cleaning the office building near the crime scene, finally broke his silence. He claimed to have seen something the night of the murder. He had been cleaning the hallways when he saw a familiar face enter the victim's office shortly before her death. It was the victim's lawyer, Raymond Sharp, the one who had mysteriously disappeared days after the execution. But it was what the janitor said next that froze Clara's blood. Sharp wasn't alone. He was with someone else, someone from the city's high court, someone with the power to make it all disappear. Clara confronted the city's most influential judge, Evelyn Greer, a woman whose career had been built on untouchable power. Judge Greer had been in Hale's trial, and she had signed off on his execution without question. But Clara had uncovered something disturbing, an old, sealed file indicating that Greer had known Hale's defense attorney, Raymond Sharp, long before the trial. As Clara stepped into the judge's lavish office, she was ready for the truth. But nothing prepared her for what came next. Judge Greer smiled, that cold, predatory grin that sent shivers down Clara's spine. "I knew you'd come eventually," Greer said, locking the door behind her. "But you're too late. The truth doesn't matter anymore." Clara's heart raced as Greer began to speak, revealing the dark web of corruption that had orchestrated the murder, the trial, and Hale's execution. Greer had been the puppet master, pulling the strings all along, using Hale as a scapegoat for a crime that had been committed by someone far more powerful. "You're just a pawn in this game," Greer sneered. "And now, you'll never leave here with your truth." Before Clara could react, the lights flickered. The last thing she heard was the click of the door locking behind her. Days passed. Clara's story was never published. The authorities closed the investigation into Mark Hale's death, citing insufficient evidence. Her last confession had been silenced. But the truth, like the darkness in a city that refuses to see it, lingered. Someone would always know. Someone would always remember. And somewhere in the shadows, a voice whispered, "The truth will come in time."